Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In this series of episodes, we're discussing how specific cities impacted Polish history. We left off our previous discussion on the topic of why no uprising against the Germans erupted in Krakow during the final stages of the Second World War.
In 1944, when the Soviets took the city, naturally in Warsaw you had the Warsaw Uprising breaking out in the summer of 1944. In Krakow, however, there were some plans initially to launch not a nationwide uprising, but whenever the Red Army reached a city, the idea was for the Poles to rise up in arms against the Germans and welcome the Red Army as the host of a certain area and city, and thus it would give them legitimacy and a leg to stand on when it comes to claiming that they are in control of a certain area. Such uprisings broke out in Vilna, or Vilnius as it is known today, and Lviv or Lviv, and then most famously in Warsaw, where 250,000 Poles were killed either as members of the resistance or just as civilians that were massacred in most cases. The Red Army reached Krakow later, since what had happened in Warsaw had already happened. The Poles had realized that this idea of receiving help from the Red Army, greeting them as the hosts of a certain area, was simply not feasible. So there was no uprising breaking out in Krakow. After the Red Army took control of the city, they, just as the Germans, were quite uncomfortable with the fact that this had been a center of Polish intellectuals for centuries. So they wanted to give the city more of a working class character. They decided to build an entire new part of the city called Nowa Huta, in which a majority of the population would be working in massive steel mills. The idea certainly had some impact on Krakow, but it's not fair to say that it diminished its role as the intellectual center in many ways of Poland. That survived communism unscathed, and also it is quite symbolical that in many ways Poland's revival and the start on the road to independence again is closely associated with
Krakow. Indeed, yes.
Especially with Pope John Paul II, who was a native son, who had spent many years in Krakow and was representing the city before being sent to Rome, where he became a cardinal. Later, when he would return to Poland, he always had a special relationship with the city of Krakow. And him being elected Pope really energized the Polish people. He returned to Poland for the first time in 1978, giving a historical speech, not in Krakow, in Warsaw, here on the Piłsudski Square, as it is known today. But it is said that speech was probably what launched a certain change in mentality of Poles, and 2 years later, a year and a half, in 1980, the Solidarity movement was created among great strikes and protests. And initially, the communists were caught on their back heels, and they had to agree to the demands of this 10 million strong organization to let it become a free trade union that was not politically dominated by the government and the communist regime. It was the first such organization behind the Iron Curtain. Naturally, later in 1981, with the introduction of martial law, they cracked down and made solidarity illegal.
Adam, I'm going to have to ask you to pause there because, as usual, the clock has defeated us. There we are. I've had to ask Adam to pause, but fear not. If you join us next time on Poland Daily History, as we hope you will, we'll pick up the story of Krakow. In the meantime, thank you for watching.